Welcome to Studying Law Around the World. I'm Claudio Klaus. In each episode, I talk with lawyers, law students, and professors from different parts of the world to talk about legal education, careers, and what the profession looks like in real life. We talk about the hard parts, the surprises, and the decisions that shaped their paths. Whether you're planning to study abroad, thinking about working in another legal system, or just curious about how law works around the world, this podcast is for you.
So many of the guests on this podcast have talked about how important it is to have strong writing skills as a lawyer. It's true, written communication is essential in this profession, but it can also be one of the trickiest skills to master. If you find your writing feels a bit clunky, or you're getting a lot of edits on your work, or perhaps you're breaking into an English-speaking jurisdiction for the first time, Grammatica International can help. I'm Rebecca Lockwood, the lawyer, mediator, and educator behind Grammatica, and we help lawyers and law students to write more sharply, speak more clearly, and advance their careers with group training and one-on-one skills coaching designed just for legal professionals. I have worked with so many lawyers like you who are exceptionally smart, qualified, and capable, but need a bit of guidance to stand out in a competitive legal market. And I get it myself, having lived and worked in 5 countries during my 17 years in law and education. Whether you're looking to sharpen your writing skills generally, refresh your CV, or draft an application for a law program, Grammatica can help. Visit grammatica.co to learn more.
Today I have a special guest here. I have Tom Macintosh Zheng. He will be speaking about his experience in England, Canada, and also now as an entrepreneur. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tom.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Claudio. It's a look forward to talking to you about my experiences.
Amazing. And to start it off, I'd love to hear a little more about your story. So can you introduce yourself to our audience and also share a little bit about this journey, law school, practice, and Courtready.ca?
Right. So I'm currently a legal tech entrepreneur. My goal is to make it easier for Canadians to access and use our civil litigation system. And I have been building several tools aimed at achieving that. But before switching into this, I was a commercial litigation lawyer for over 4 years in Toronto. I first started at a boutique called Laxell Sullivan Lysis Gottlieb LLP, and then I was at Fasken for 2 years. Before that, I did my training contract, which is the articling student equivalent in England at a law firm called Morrison and Forrester. So spent 2 years there training as a lawyer, and then 4 years being a lawyer in Toronto. And before that, I did my law degree at King's College London and my undergraduate degree at McGill University in Montreal.
Amazing. So you've worked at top litigation firms, both in Canada and England. And I'd love to know a little more about, what were the biggest professional or cultural differences that you've noticed between practicing law in these two jurisdictions?
Well, I would say that because I was trained as a solicitor in England, I wasn't able to do the barrister work, which is a different system than we have here in Canada, because in England, the profession is split, right? So you have the solicitors and the barristers are the ones who are able to make oral submissions before the court. So that part of my career was missing. And after moving back to Canada, I was able to do almost exclusively barrister work. And I was very lucky to have appeared in many different courts in both Ontario and part of our federal court system.
Amazing. And was there something specific that sparked that change from you? So to start off, I'd love to ask about this specific point you just mentioned on being a solicitor in England and then becoming a litigator in Toronto, but also moving forward, once you become a litigator here and act for all those years, then you notice something with the system or what really inspired you to start Courtready.ca?
Right. So my first switch was from a solicitor to barrister, and it was purely based on my observations that in England, in a litigation context, the solicitor would do all the prep work, right, from evidence gathering to talking with the clients, to developing the legal strategy, and to writing some of the legal submissions. But they don't get to argue it. So imagine if you do 90% of the work, But when it comes to the opportunity to make those submissions before a judge, you won't be able to do that. And I don't know the exact reason why that split profession still exists, but I'm sure they have a good reason for it because, England, they've been doing the common law for many, many, many centuries. So then I thought, well, if I could do 90% of the work, then it makes sense to just do the last 10% as well. And in Ontario, as you would know as well, the profession is not split. So if you're in litigation, you get to do both the 90% and the 10%. And I find that it's easy to be able to prepare the case the whole way as we have it here instead of handing it off almost last second to a barrister who would then make submissions on your behalf. So that's the first transition between solicitor and barrister. Now, the bigger one, which is why I decided to leave private practice altogether. And the answer is I can do more for the legal system outside of it than being inside of it. Now, that seems a bit of an odd explanation because you might naturally ask yourself, if you're inside of it, you can do more, but if you're outside of it, you're just an observer. And the answer to that is I was a lawyer for 4 years. I worked at two amazing firms. And because of that, I see how the process works for a client to try to navigate the legal system, both as a barrister, as a lawyer, and as an advocate before the judge. And you have this insight, and this insight teaches you that our system is not designed to handle as many cases as we have today. So then the answer becomes, well, what are we going to do about it? And the answer I found is to adopt technological tools as part of the litigation process. And I'm not even talking about AI. We don't even need AI to accomplish this, is to make different pieces of the process quicker. So one example that we built at Courtready.ca with a very good friend of mine, Adam Marciniak, a great coder as well. He and I thought about, well, right now in Toronto, as an example, if you want to find court dates, hearing dates for certain types of events like a motion or before an associate judge. You use a system called Calendly. Now, if you go to Calendly right now, you see that the first available dates is in 2026, March, February, May, July. And this is the issue. You're waiting for more than a year sometimes to have a 75-minute court event before a judge. So there's the issue with the delay, but what we thought about was, well, okay, yes, there are dates very far off in the future, but what if someone cancels? As you know, Claudio, cases tend to settle. What happens when those cases settle? Those dates get brought back into the system for people to be able to book, but you don't know about it unless you're manually checking this website once a week. And this is a personal experience of mine, right? When we had the same issue at Fast, when we were booking a motion date and we were asking some of the articling students or some of the assistants to manually check the course website. And I thought, well, there has to be a better way. So that's an example of Adam and I, we built this tool that automatically monitors the system for every dedicated interval. And then as soon as a date comes up, you can sign up for a notification so that you can be notified when the dates you want become available. And this is what we built at courtdates.ca. But that's just one example, one tiny example of what we can do outside of the law to make the justice system easier and more accessible and hopefully reduce some of the delays.
Amazing. So just so I understand your product correctly as well. So you're developing mostly focused on lawyers, mostly focused on helping the court system, the client themselves. Who is kind of your main audience?
Well, the easy answer to that question is everyone, right? Because even though lawyers could benefit from these tools, more and more people are deciding to take their own cases to court without hiring a lawyer. Now, there are many reasons for this, one being that legal services is becoming more and more expensive, unfortunately. So the things that we are building not only focus on helping lawyers, but also help anyone who is using the justice system.
Fantastic. That's amazing. And talking about, being an entrepreneur, recently I've had other entrepreneurs in the podcast, and it's always been so interesting to hear, the building process and so forth, even for, people who go off and become a solo practitioner. But I'm wondering if there's any, surprising lesson that you've learned or that you've observed since becoming a tech founder?
The biggest lesson I've learned thus far is you can do a lot with existing tools. By that, I mean, I mentioned this briefly. You don't need AI to do a lot of this stuff, right? Because in legal tech, there tends to be a tendency to focus on the most advanced thing, right? Using AI to do whatever. But my philosophy has are there things that you can fix without using the most advanced tool out there? Now, with the Courtdates.ca monitoring system, there's no AI involved. It's tested technology that solves an immediate issue. Another example is what we built. A part of the Courtready.ca is this prejudgment and post-judgment interest calculator. So for those of you who are not familiar with that concept, let's say, Claudio, you sue me for $1 million today, but you don't get the judgment until a year from now. Between today and a year from now, you are entitled to interest. Now, normally when people calculate that interest, they either use an Excel sheet by looking at the court's website, or in the law firms, we hand it off to clerks and other people. Again, there has to be a better way. There is no reason why this process cannot be made quicker by just a calculator. So, and that's what we built. And this is another example of we're not using AI to do any of this because we don't need to. There are so many low-hanging fruits that can be built to help, and that's what we're going to be focused on.
Amazing. Oh, moving forward to another topic here within this episode, I'd love to hear a little more about, personal insights from your experience as well in the field. And I wanted to know, what have you learned about the legal profession that maybe law students and junior lawyers often don't hear in school, and that it, kind of takes a few years in practice to be aware of and to really be into?
Well, the immediate one that comes to mind is how difficult it is and how much of a toll it can take on one's health, both physical and mental. There are many reasons for this, and I can see why this is not really taught in law school because you don't want to encourage people to go into the legal profession without giving them too many warnings as to why they shouldn't or they should think twice before they do it. That said, I do believe that when you're getting into something, you should know as much as possible before getting into it. Obviously, it's a rewarding career if you believe in the justice system and if you believe in this idea that you should speak out on behalf of others who may not be able to do so themselves. But the cost, the personal cost on lawyers, and this is not just those in private practice, in-house, big or small firms alike, it's immense. As a junior lawyer, your first, second year, third year, you need to start getting used to canceling plans with people and having fewer friends. And when you start to do that, obviously, it doesn't make you feel good because you, of course, have this hypothetical idea that I'll be busy, but not at the cost of those personal relationships. Second, we talk about mental health a lot. And the concrete example I can give you is the legal profession, and again, only as a junior lawyer, especially, you don't have much control over the work. You're being given assignments, as an example, a research task, you do it, you hand it back. Then you don't know if there's going to be another task coming or there will be follow-up questions because you might not be copied in the chain of emails that actually gives you better insight of what's going on. Is because you don't know what happens next. That causes a lot of people anxiety. Now, is this something that you can probably get used to? Yes, there are ways to deal with it, but things like this are not taught in law school, and they should really be taught because once you're entering this, either the corporate world or in-house, you're dealing with people, you're dealing with expectations. And in a way, none of that has to do with the practice of law or the knowledge of law that you need to have, but is about how to deal with people in difficult situations.
Fantastic. Thanks for bringing that very sincere point as well. And if you could change one thing about how legal education is taught globally with your international experience, what would it be and why would you choose to change it?
Yeah, I wouldn't comment on globally because I've only been educated in 2 countries. So I can speak about perhaps Canada and Yeah, I'll focus more on Canada and England, just because I'm more familiar with those systems. I think it's to tell people and to teach people what they can do concretely with the legal degree, because so much of the law degree is focused on the knowledge of law. But again, I talked about mental health. But connected to that is what kind of careers can you actually have with the practice of law, and that's important because you get into law school, many people have a very set view of what it is that they want to do. Some people want to become a corporate commercial lawyer, criminal lawyer, or human rights. But actually, the image in their mind about the day to day work of the people they try to emulate once they graduate from law school might be very different in reality. It's about, again, going back to the theme as the theme of making sure people know what they're getting themselves into. If you want to be a criminal lawyer, that you should really, really learn about the day to day of that person. And I think that's something law schools can do a better job at teaching the student, is not just the knowledge of the law, but the practicalities of being a lawyer.
Very, very interesting. And that always keeps me engaged, and it always gives me so many thoughts about how we approach it and also the different ways that law education is delivered as well. Sometimes by practitioners, sometimes by academics, and all that entails. But going forward here to wrap up today's episode, I'd love to hear a little bit of an advice from you two. So if you were to give some kind of advice right now to law students who are graduating in 2025, getting into the market now, or even foreign paid lawyers who want to really carve out a place for themselves in this field, in this career, what would you tell them?
So again, I'll limit to Canada as well, because as you know, I work with quite a bit with the NCA, so the National Committee of Accreditation lawyers who are trying to make to start or continue their legal career in Canada. And so I think the tip there is well, let me take it back. How much money a law firm spends on marketing may not have anything to do with how good they are as a law firm. What I mean by that is you come into the legal market in Canada, you have certain views about which firms are good, which firms are not as good. You may think a firm in a tall building in downtown Toronto is necessarily better than the one that's further north from downtown. But these perceptions actually often are incorrect. And this is where I think when it comes to researching firms is critical, because there are now more and more specialist firms out there, and they tend to be smaller. They don't have the large advertising budgets, but they're very good at what they do. And I always encourage NCA students to look beyond the 2 kilometer radius from downtown Toronto, or any big city for that matter. And I will admit sometimes it's hard to change that perception, because perhaps in other places, the higher your office is, the better you are. But that's not necessarily the case anymore.
Amazing. What an insightful piece of advice. I really appreciate you taking the time to share this with our listeners. And also thank you so much for being in the podcast today.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
And thank you all for tuning into today's episode, and we'll see you on the next one.